the conversation. It's the conversation. Y'all ready? Y'all ready? Let's go. Let's go. No filter, no restrictions. You about to get my opinion in its purest form. So my words, don't try to spin them. What I said is what I said, and what I said I meant it. The gloves are off now when I'm coming out swinging. So engage in verbal combat, but you better be ready. Cause this here for me is light work, even if the topic's heavy. I'm ready for it all with no running from nothing. You just take the time to digest what I put in, no rushing. But time is moving, don't waste it. You want the real, come and face it. Come sit and talk to me if you want it straight without a chaser. And it might burn a little when you step on up to taste it, but it's nothing harsh, I promise. Just a little conversation.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the conversation with Harold and Dave. I'm neither Harold nor Dave that we've known by now. I'm Keone, but I am here with Harold and Dave. Before we get into our topic today, we're talking all things social media. We started this thing where we were going to address some things that are commented or said on some of our platforms. So, one of the things I want to talk about from our last show when we talked about the messaging, I asked you guys a question about the messaging that you feel like that's coming from the Republican side versus the messaging that's coming from the Democratic side, and how they've been doing in that. And one of the responses from JJW8815 says Dems tout cleverly named bills that were named to address a problem, but in actuality sent funds somewhere else and had nominal effect on the problem the bill was named for. So I asked an example, and he said the infrastructure bill. So he's saying that Dems will clout that they are handling a certain bill, but then will direct their attention or the funds for that bill into something else. I didn't get much more clarification or evidence on that, but that's what he feels happens on the Democratic side. Do you guys have a response to that?
Well, I'll just say that with any bill that Congress passes, there's often other things on there. The example of the infrastructure bill, given how many Republicans have been out taking credit for the bill that they voted against, I would say it's hard to then say, hey, that bill didn't do anything because, well, like even Marjorie Taylor Greene, I mean, it's legendary, right? How much credit they've been taking for that. But and I don't know that's a Congress thing, not a Democratic or Republican thing, though, I think.
Well, in addition to that, I think, what must be realized is that when Congress appropriates and approves funding for something, those dollars go to the states to implement. And so if it's not implemented when those dollars are sent to your particular state, then you need to be questioning your state government leadership. And we do know that some of those state governors have rejected certain funding packages that were allocated to them for whatever reason. For example, when the Obama administration was in place, they had sent $20 billion to do high-speed rail from high-speed train from Miami to Orlando, and Governor Scott at the time rejected it. So is that a Dem fault? Is that an Obama administration fault, or is that particular state's government's fault for not implementing it as it should be? So I would, challenge that person to look a little bit deeper into the situation. Yes, and it would be something frustrating. I would want monies allocated for housing, as they did in Mississippi, to go to a volleyball, recreation or training center. But that's a whole nother story, and we're not going to get into that.
Okay. I thought the plane was landing, but he kind of saw the airport and said, "You know what? I'm going to pull up a little bit because we're going to come back around."
Sorry about
All right. So, and that's something that I'm glad both of you broke down, because again, we talk about this politically. We have different sects of people. We have people that have dived into every nuance of everything political, and they know the ins and outs. Then we have our everyday people who just see what they hear or know certain things, and it's not broken down. So that's a good explanation for both of you. Before we start getting into social media,
quick, I want to add
go ahead.
one more piece, Keone. I'm also curious: has he looked into any appropriations by the Republicans, if there have been any, to see if they're being properly spent. So, I mean, my thing is, when it comes to our tax dollars, we shouldn't be looking at it from a partisan perspective. We should make sure both parties are accountable in the appropriation, approval, and spending of said dollars. But I
Well, the two
digress. And I'm
things you
landing.
both just said, when funding is sent down to different states, different states are ran by different political parties. So that's something that needs to be looked at individual. And I think it's either you or Dave said, well, that's a Congress thing. Was that you or Dave? I'm sorry. Who
Dave
said
said a
that?
I
Congress
was the
thing.
Yeah, it's a Congress thing. That's not a party thing. That's a Congress thing. So that's why we have these conversations and break these things down. So I love
we
it.
can all hate Congress.
Yeah.
Together.
Please remind me,
Yikes.
Dave, if you can remember, because I always butcher it, if you said historically the government has been more successful when it's been one party has a certain seat and the other party has another one. I forget what it was. Do you remember? You're like when there's a Democratic president with a Republican Congress, or when there's a Republican president with a Democratic Congress. Do you remember at all?
You aren't talking to me.
Yeah, I am.
Oh no, I would never I would never assert that there is a pattern. Somebody else brought that up, and I'm
Now I
usually
gotta dig it up because Dave doesn't remember. Yes, it was you. I gotta go find it now.
I said that it's hard to do, but that split can be better. But I'm usually the one that there aren't really clear patterns, right? That when
Okay,
you look
now,
at these
now
things,
that's my mission this week. I got to go find that
Uh-oh.
footage now.
Uh-oh.
No,
it
because
is
the way
now
you
my story
explained it,
that I'm sticking to.
well, that's why I was wishing you remember, because the way you said it made more sense than how I'm repeating it. But I'll try to rejog your memory later, another episode when I find it. But before we get into general social media errors, because it doesn't have to be just politically, I want to start with the political side of social media. Have you felt that, and you could say either party or whatever you want to start, the use of social media, do you feel it's being utilized successfully, whether that's the messaging or just, campaigning or whatever? How do you feel on the social media presence of candidates? You can start with candidates, or you can talk about political parties, however you wish. Start with you.
Well, I'll start as we both hesitate, right? We feel like, who's going to go first in this? I think it's wildly variable between candidates and office holders. Obviously, Donald Trump was very good at doing social media, and he had his thing. We have that Democrat Johnson in North Carolina, who did just such an excellent job with his social media. And so we have several people who are really good at it. Other folks, are maybe not as good at it, would be my thing.
And I think also if we reflect back, it was actually President Obama that began utilizing social media, to spur his election and help build his infrastructure for his election engine, shall we say. And I think Donald Trump he looked at it, he tweaked it to his benefit, and he just basically focused on one social media platform, whereas previously the previous president or that prior president, used multiple social media as well as other types of media platforms to help their candidacy into assail into the office in which they sought.
Yeah, I literally had never heard of tweets until I was reading a Doonesbury thing about somebody working on Obama's campaign, and they're like, "Oh, the last tweet," and I was like, "What's a tweet?" Oh, those days. Oh, those days.
I mean, but I'm surprised it's not called a twit, considering it's Twitter, but that's a whole nother thing. But
well, now it's X, so we still
But
call
we're
it
still
Twitter,
calling them tweets because
'Cause-
You're not going to call it an X.
right. Hey, I did you see my ex? No. What do you? I didn't see.
And I'm not looking for your
Did
ex
you see
either.
my
Just
tweet?
so you know.
Before we go further into the specifics of social media that our wonderful co-producer Dylan has brought up, how much? Because Mark is a perfect person that would have been great on here because he loves talking about governmental control on things. The regulations that we see on social media, the things that have come up over the time that we're talking about. So, one of the things it says cite some of the recent social media bans, such as the one passed in Florida, but the person that sent it in didn't tell me which one, so I don't know. But I know here in North Carolina, and hey, I'm an adult, don't look at me crazy. There are a lot of now XXX sites that you can't go on because if you go on them, there's a little video that pops up.
Really? I
Yeah.
had not noticed. I have never tried to log on to such a site.
We're just saying, if you try to go on Pornhub, there's a little lady that pops up and it talks about, and there's messages that talk about the
Oh,
new
wow.
regulations in North Carolina that you have to verify your identity each time that you go on that site. So, I mean, it didn't bother me. I just didn't go on it. But there are adults who are extremely mad because every time they want to go on their little porn site, they have to take a picture of their ID and re-verify their age before they can access it. Some people think that's a little crazy, but then you have the crowd that's going to be, we need to protect the children because there's always the protect the children crowd.
Or the provider, like in the case of you mentioned Pornhub. We're not on Twitter, so I can actually say, not Twitter, we're not on TikTok, so I can actually say that word, porn. The thing is, though, that they're not available. They are choosing in these states to block everyone.
Yep.
And this raises a question. Is your ban, is what you're doing actually aimed at protecting children? Because usually protecting children is kind of an exception to our libertarian thing, right? That it's one thing for adults to do it, but children is another. Or have you put an onerous requirement, and are you using children as an excuse to basically block and prevent adults from having access to things? And that's an open question. I don't know. I like it hasn't, like me, it's not a big thing in my life. I haven't researched it much, but
Right.
Well,
But
and I
that is
often wonder,
something before you hear it. But that is something that you just brought that's used a lot. Let's use because no one wants to be the person to argue against something that's being provided to protect children. Like you never want to be that guy, right? But we know, like you were saying, that can be used as the defense, but that's not really what the defense should be using. But go ahead, Harold.
yeah, I was going to say, I mean, there are many children's platforms, but what are the protocols to protect those children from adult pedophiles? Getting on those sites. We seem to create mountains out of molehills consistently, and I understand protection is what we need. But, when I look at I think it's Roblox is one of the children's sites, but what do they do to stop predatory adults from going on those sites and pursuing young people and encouraging meetings outside of that platform to potentially put that child in harm's way? So
Well,
when we start this whole talk of banning, it's
Mhm.
difficult because there's so many nuances, so many other situations that may arise that sometimes we can even create out of an attempt to try to I guess protect in one area. Because I'm not worried about a child watching porn if you can put the protections or the proper software on my child's phone so I can monitor where they're going and make sure we block certain things from being allowed. So we have the tools that are there. Do we need laws to enforce those laws? Because I know at one point we were talking about parents' rights in Florida. However, the parent has the right to block or put software on their children's phones so that they can control certain aspects of what they have access to. So again, I'm trying to this whole thing with legislative bans is interesting to me. and where
Well,
we're
like
going
you
with
said,
it.
I feel like the bans always go to the wrong place. It's not going to the apps or something else where kids would use more to protect them. You're using it more on sites that adult use mostly. And like Dave said, a lot of these sites aren't even dealing with it. They just block all the users from that area, just like gambling sites would do if you're in a certain area and you put, because you have to have your location on with a lot of these
Hmm.
apps. You now have to have your location on. If they see you're in a certain location, you could be just visiting, but if you're in a certain location, it does not allow you to use that app at all.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now, Florida's got a ban on social media that
Hmm.
under 14 you're not allowed to get on. And of all the things Ron DeSantis has done or not done in life, I don't feel that this is a bad thing, right? It seems to be more of a reasonable break. And sometimes it is helpful to parents to have, things, to have these things blocked off and to just ensure that, hey, we don't have people on. And so I'm not, like I say, I'm very libertarian, but when it comes to kids, I'm more open to, well, do we have a common sense thing that is going to be, and does this make sense? And honestly, I feel blocking 14-year-olds and below from social media might not be a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing, but I mean, it's such a wasteless thing. It's a workaround. For instance, I work in entertainment. I coach actors and models, and one of our requirements is they have to have an Instagram. So what happens when I have a 12-year-old? Their parent, of course, is the one that creates the Instagram and control the Instagram, but now they still have an Instagram. It's just controlled by their parent. Um, and then it's these things that have, if you're a certain age or not, they're not all using a verification system. So all I have to do is put in a certain birth date and I've passed the verification restriction. So how far are we going with that verification of age does matter. Because again, most of these sites that do have age verification, they all do. A lot of the apps, the dating apps, they have they have age requirements. But if you put in a birth date, you've passed that. It's really simple. So
It's
how
math.
deep do we want to go? Simple math, right? Um, you put in a certain date, and you've now passed uh, that part. So I definitely do get that. How do age restrictions on social media platforms affect its users, and what are the potential consequences? We've already talked about that one, so to speak. Um, should this be something that's controlled federally, statewide, or are we again putting too much into it?
Well, I think we got to make up our mind. I mean, because you keep hearing states' rights, states' rights, states' rights. They don't want federal government to have what they call perceived overreach, and it creates some level of frustration and confusion because we are selective and we cherry pick certain aspects of what we want the states to have the right to do, and then we then later on want the federal government to come in. And my whole issue with the notion of states' rights is you want it until there's a natural disaster, which will require federal assistance, and then now you want the federal government to come in and bail you out. And I think we need to actually just again make sure we know clearly what we want, and then be consistent in how we want it implemented.
And I think consistency speaks to um, this is communication. It is not something that happens in a state or in a locality. You can talk to anyone from any part of the country and part of the world. And so having, I would say there is a pragmatic reason to have national standards just so we don't have a hodgepodge, because it just makes it more complicated for the companies. And I can't see, there are some times where you adjust conditions to the local environment. I don't see in social media what's different between Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Florida, and California, when it comes to that.
I always love the thing when I accidentally put the wrong person on the screen. So the entire time Harold was talking, Dave, you were up. I don't know how I mixed it up. You guys look so much alike. Sometimes I
I thought
I
that's
get
why you picked us,
confused.
right?
It's the glasses.
Twins, yeah, we're twins.
The glasses and the beard.
Hey,
Here's a hint: Harold has the longer beard.
Um, I know I was watching and I cannot remember what it said. It said when the attention was brought to a certain site being restricted, it actually brought up the amount of traffic to the site. And it reminded me of when I was little and you drive and see a billboard that says that a church would put up, which now I think the actual porn stores put them up and said they were a church, where it says, sponsored by whatever Baptist church. Please do not support the XX bookstore at this address. And it's like, I didn't even know there was a store there, but now I do.
Free advertising, baby.
So it's like, well, thank you for bringing it to my attention. I didn't know that was there, and now that happens. Um, Guidelines for politicians or people running for office or currently in office. Let's start with running for office. People running for office and how they can use social media. Should that have its own set of rules, just like they do for what types of commercials and things that can be put out?
Pretty sure they already do. I think that anything that would apply to a commercial would apply to social media, and so I think candidates do have certain requirements. I can't, especially if they are in any way, they're probably, candidates are probably not posting things based on organic reach. They're because some might. Trump had a lot of that, but they're probably promoting, which it becomes advertising. They've spent money, therefore, bam, the rules apply.
Yeah. Well, because it's not called lying when you do it as a politician. If you say something that's not factually true, I forget what it's called. My professor had a funny way of calling it. Like, you're allowed to tweet something or say something or accuse. Like, if you and Harold were running, you could say Harold doesn't support this bill, this bill, this bill, and actually they go back and look at the voting record and he did, but you're allowed to say he didn't without any factual proof that he didn't. A lot of people are confused on that when they look at social media and commercials on how are people allowed to say certain things. I know they get to say, well, this commercial is endorsed by, Senator Dave Hayes, but it wasn't made by Senator Dave Hayes. Like, I don't know the nuance of that and why that's allowed. It seems to a lot of people that shouldn't be allowed, but it is.
I think a lot of it goes to the problem of just verifying everything. And in the past, it was assumed that if you said something that was demonstrably false, you would then face blowback from it. And that assumes a media, a third party that exists to do that. That assumes attention from both sides. And in the echo chambers and the stovepiping, right, that goes out there where, you're not necessarily getting news from a newspaper, which gives both sides. We have less of that, I think.
well, I think also when we look at what's being conveyed and what's being communicated through social media, unfortunately, our First Amendment allows people to legally lie, and they'll call, they can frame it however they want, but they've been given a pass to do that, and unfortunately, until we have some level of a penalty, a fine, or whatever the case may be, if you're presenting false information about your opponent, which, we do know that there's, all types of research or opposition research. I'm sorry, I had a pause
No,
for a
you're
minute.
good.
But we do know that there's operation research that takes place during, campaigns where they might find negative information about a particular client. Well, again, as long as that's true, and it's framed correctly and honestly, I don't have a problem with that. But then when we can just make a false allegation with nothing to substantiate it, it does cloudy and muddy the waters of the political landscape, which makes it difficult for voters to make a choice of who they feel should represent them. And in many respects, it's not going to matter, because if you have a D or an R next to your name, you're guaranteed to get a certain percentage of people regardless. But I think when we look at how social media is being utilized, there is not enough, in my opinion, um, oversight being made to ensure that whatever's put out there is accurate, it's true, and can be verified.
Well, we all agree this. It was a lot easier to control narratives and political discourse to the masses when there were 3 or 5 channels out there, right? Now, like they would say, how do you regulate all of this? Now there's so many ways to advertise, whether it's different streaming platforms, whether it's different live TV events, and when you get to social media, there's so many social media platforms. Who the heck would be able to track, verify, and do all of these things? And that's why a lot of people have felt it's gotten out of hand. Um, One of the things that's a hot topic that was put in the from our audience that was put in the questioning is the ability of AI to control to push the answers that people are looking for and who controls what the AI says. Now, we're not AI experts. I don't know, maybe Dave and Harold are, but I'm not an AI expert. But the reason why that was brought up because we did a very interesting thing. So ChatGPT, we all know what ChatGPT is, correct? So I placed in, because this was done by someone, I placed in Chat GPT just the words, I am proud to be white. Okay. The AI responds to me, it is important to recognize that pride in one's culture or ethnic background can be a natural and healthy aspect of identity. However, it's also essential to approach the pride with understanding and empathy, considering the historical and social context in which such identities exist. While being proud of one's ethnicity is understandable, it's crucial to be mindful of how this pride is expressed to ensure. And it goes on and on. It's telling me, hey, good for you, but make sure that you're empathetic and understand. But what happens is when I put I am proud to be black, ChatGPT starts off with a different tone. Celebrating and embracing one's cultural heritage and identity is a beautiful thing. Being proud of your black identity can be a source of strength, resilience, and connection to a rich and diverse cultural history. Black pride movements have been pivotal in promoting So this has angered people. They're doing it on the internet. Why is it that if I type in, I'm proud to be white, that it sounds like it's lecturing me? And when I put in, I'm proud to be any other ethnicity, even though white's not an ethnicity, it seems to back me up. From how I perceive it is that I think the AI is smart. It knows that most people who are going on that have this ethnic background, they're not looking for certain groups or trying to use this question to oppress anyone. And normally when someone's online and they're looking up proud to be white or something else, they come from they have a different mission than what that person that's saying I'm proud to be black or however they phrase that question. That's how I take it. How do you break down why AI would be presenting the answers to these two questions so differently? I'll start with anybody.
Well, I kind of like those answers. I think those are great answers, right? Especially the proud to be white one. You know, it's kind of like I thought the AI kind of gave a good answer. And obviously, though, AIs learn from everything that's out there, and they reflect the social. You know, because a lot of this is the material that's what people say, what's online for the AIs to read and use as a database, and so they, just like Keone said, they picked up on the difference here. And there is a difference in the United States to go from saying, I'm proud to be white, which I don't believe I just said that in any way that could be taken.
Don't worry,
I'm
won't clip you just making that sound. I won't clip it. I won't. I promise.
But when someone says that as the dominant culture, as the hegemonic social group, if you will, it hits different than when somebody who is in a different group says it, whether it be I'm proud to be black. I suspect if you put in I'm proud to be Irish, you would have gotten a different answer.
Well, let's see. While you're talking, I'll do that.
Or I'm proud to be English, or although white and black are the obvious things there, and I don't see a problem with it. It is a reflection of the data that the AI has to work with.
Yeah. So wait, hold on. Before we go into that, Dave, you're actually right. When I don't say white, when I say Irish, Scottish, English, it sounds the same beat as when I type in I'm proud to be black. Because the AI understands black is not African American or African. Black is in different cultures. There's black Hispanics. There's black uh, other cultures. So
or
yeah,
non-white.
the only one where it seems like it's doing that is when I just say white. But if I put down different cultures in the, and I hate when people say, but anyway, when I put Irish, Scottish, or anything else, it actually sounds the same. So there you go.
Well,
Harold?
and I was kind of wondering, when because you gave us kind of two samples, two samples that would be considered opposites in some respects if you're looking at it from a color strand. But if you had said, "I am Hispanic" or "I am Asian," what it would have looked like or sounded like. But unfortunately, within the information that Chat GPT is processing that particular prompt, it's clear that it's now rationalizing how it should present or speak to that individual. Because it doesn't know who you are. Basically, it doesn't know you're a black man typing in a prompt that, "Hey, I'm proud to be white." All it knows is you're a user that's putting in this prompt. So your processing of its response, obviously it's going to, if I could use David's term, hit a little different, as opposed to him or someone else putting in that particular prompt to see exactly how. Now, if you say, "I'm a proud supremacist," whether it's white, black, orange, green, blue, purple, whatever color, or whatever group, how was that going to be, um, articulated by Chat GPT? So you've now opened up some level of curiosity. Now I'm gonna be sitting here for the next 2 weeks typing in all these different groups, trying to say I'm proud to be all this and all of that, and just to see what the response would be.
I
Well,
think it is just an artifact of, if you just think of what's out there that the AI can source to put together an answer. White, there's going to be a lot more discussion of white supremacy, of white national, and when you put Irish, right, actually Irish is going to show up as an oppressed minority a lot, right? And so I think it's going to be an artifact of just what is out there related to that keyword, right? Because it is just one word that you're talking about, shifting it.
well, I just typed in "I'm proud to be David Hayes," and it says it seems you mentioned a specific individual. If you are in fact David Hayes and you are asking that you're saying that you're proud to be David Hayes, you might have developed some narcissistic. No, it doesn't say
I'm done. I'm
Yeah, he
done.
picked on me, not you. So
No, it doesn't say
basically
that.
his uncle.
I did type that in there just to see what it says, but it didn't say that.
Yeah.
Uh, but I want to go back to that discussion, and that makes sense the way you guys broke that down because that's been used on social media. But of course, the conversation that I've been seeing wasn't like we just did. It's just like, look at ChatGPT. They're brainwashing us from the government, making us feel that it's terrible to be white and it's great to be black. And I'm like, okay. And then, people are going to run with that. And that's not how the AI is operating. Because just like Harold said, the AI has no idea who I am. I could be a 12-year-old Latino female that typed that in there. The AI has no idea how to bring that up. Government regulation on the use of AI. That's been on, if you guys watch C-SPAN or anything like that, I've watched 2 congressional hearings on that a month ago. Um, why is there a need for the government to control how much AI should be used and what it's used for? I know there's a plethora of reasons, and you guys are going to give me ones from your own area. Um, when that happened, a lot of people who were against governments having their hands in everything said, here's the government again trying to enforce how we can use AI. But I always say these things are necessary. For instance, we all know what happened with the motor companies years ago. You
I
know,
thought you were going to go Skynet.
no, more and more computers were
Mhm.
used and humans were being phased out this, 30, 40, whatever years ago. But the government had a bunch of congressional hearings to force the car companies to have a deadline on their phase out. You can't just come and phase out people now. They made them do it at a small pace. I never knew that because there was no C-SPAN back then. I didn't know the governments were having hearings on this. So, how do you feel with the government and its hands on regulating the use of AI and how AI can be used?
Well, this is where I become more conservative, right? This is where and there is, if you're talking about this, they're going to take your jobs kind of situation. AI is certainly going to replace a lot of people, and they're going to take a lot of jobs and mechanize them. The thing is, though, that that typically doesn't mean, we still employ people, right? We still have people doing things, and a lot of the jobs that you lose, you just bump people in other directions. And that's the typical response. And you can all argue against that all you want. But right now in our country, we have a fairly tight labor supply. And so, if you want to pay people $20 an hour, then you're probably going to have to bring more AI, so probably at McDonald's, you're going to talk to an AI who'll take your order. And, they're going to have to cut down on the number of people that are working there in order to pay them more money. And so, mechanization, things that help workers do more with less, increase productivity. Now, a lot of times companies do take that in higher profits. I'm not saying that it's all, it's not wonderful. It's not the end of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but at the same time, that's a necessary step of getting to that goal of trying to pay a better minimum wage without accelerating inflation. So it can work, out that way.
I mean, I understand it. Just I'm not a multi-million-dollar company, but a year and a half ago, I was paying two people about $25 an hour to do something that now I'm doing in like 15 minutes using AI to do. So it's saving AI with those two people. It's not a lot to some, but it's saving me $300 a month just from what I used to pay those two people. But so I get it, Harold.
But not only that, but when we're talking about again government oversight, government controls, the key for me is where, when, and how much. Because yeah, we definitely want to make sure if there are certain dangers on the other side of AI that we're not aware of, or that we may not even have even conceptualized ourselves, then I would hope the government would be in that arena trying to make sure those protections are there.
Skynet.
Be- because because again, dangers are always lurking, abuses are always lurking. See, before we were talking about automation taking jobs, which is what we're seeing now in a lot of our stores, where we're checking out ourselves just to make sure we get out quicker, and be more efficient. The only thing I disagree with is that store should be giving me a 10, 15, or 20% discount if I'm scanning my own groceries and bagging them. That's just my thought. But then when it comes to AI, now you're talking about the collection and processing of information, whereas it may have taken us days, weeks, or months to do the research. And I don't know how long it took David to work through his dissertation. But my point is now trying to do some of that dissertation research is going to be a lot quicker. It may not take the same length of time for those students to access and utilize AI to assist in that process. So yes, some of these people, even that are doing consulting work here, there, or in different spaces, they may be able to now utilize AI again in the space of, as you mentioned, John. I've done some stuff and work with my daughter on a few projects utilizing AI. I tell her, listen, you don't lean 100% on it. Whatever you get from AI, you use that as also information that you further investigate to make sure its validity is there, so that you don't know where these AI bots are pulling information from. Even with Chat GPT, I think it goes up to right about now, about 2022. So you're not going to have what happened in 2023 in the database yet, because I think it's 2 years behind with the current version that I'm using, which is 3.5. I'm not sure where 4.0 goes, but I do know that, again, utilizing it is excellent. It's efficient. However, always investigate what you plan to utilize so that you don't get caught, behind the scenes and in a
Okay,
dangerous
now
situation.
Dave, now Harold's just doing crazy talk. He wants people to hear things and not like investigate and look it up and make sure it's true. You want us to do that? It's crazy
Oh my
talk.
God. Yeah, it is. It is. I'm sorry. My bad.
You don't want to end up like Michael Cohen, right? Who used an AI to, I think it was Chat GPT, to prepare some briefs for his lawyer, and then it turned out the computer just made shit up, straight up made it up, and he didn't notice. And you got to be careful of that. And
Yeah.
by the way, our things, we have tools in academia. It's the measure, countermeasure, the spy versus spy competition, but we do have things that scan and recognize when something has been using chat. We also, I've had some students with false positives in that too, and so it does complicate things.
I always love the constant. We got to do a show on that. The constant battle between professors and students throughout time of who can out spy, out cheat the other. Like it's a constant thing.
I'm not engaged in it. Most of the time, I'm helping my students to achieve something. I don't take it confrontational.
I love the lazy cheater, the cheater that does a paper. Is like, do you realize you sound 55 times smarter than you did in your last paper? Can you incrementally get smarter? Not just.
I don't have many of those. I'm 28 years. I'm almost out, and I can on both hands count the number of people. So
yeah,
I gotta say.
I guess I just went to a different school.
Yeah, but even before, and they would probably know more. So, and I'm sure you used it, John, when you were doing your dissertation. That one particular website that you can paste your document in to see how much of it may.
Yeah, Mendeley. Mendeley was one. Yeah,
I just couldn't remember the name of it, but it gives you an idea of how much of it sounds like it could be. Of another particular project. And see, my thing is, when we get into this whole thing with AI and prompts and things of that nature, there are also going to be some ethical guidelines. What would that look like? How much is acceptable? How much is not acceptable? So it's going to open up a whole lot of doors when we talk about should there be some controls and regulations. But it's going to hit our academic world, I think, a lot quicker with the need for those controls and measures to be in place, because you don't know what it's going to sound like when you are requesting those reports and those papers to be turned in, and something sounds familiar. Some things sound too familiar.
Right. You always have to have control, because when something first comes out, it's always unreliable. Remember, and Dave, I know you remember this because you've been a professional the whole time. When I went back to college the first time, Wikipedia became a thing. And, everybody hated that. Do not cite Wikipedia, because Wikipedia was like the Wild Wild West. But Wikipedia has grown so much from the beginning that it's hard to find.
Should not cite Wikipedia.
No, you shouldn't. But a lot of people have.
Wikipedia.
Hold on.
Yeah, but Wikipedia did turn into something. I tell people, look, go to Wikipedia, find something, then scroll down to their citation and go to the original source and cite them.
That's what I was going to say. Wikipedia has turned into such a great, like when I first started going back to college, couldn't use Wikipedia at all. I would find things on there. I was like, wait, that's not true. But it has evolved for so long. It's been around so long now that I really find things that ain't true. But like I used to do what Dave said is I would go and then you go find their sources and then you use that sources to do. But so it could be, you don't want to cite it, but it is a really good tool. And my whole point was AI is going to get eventually to that too. Everything starts, and it evolves over a period of time. We're going to have a conversation differently about it 15 years from now, heck, 5 years from now.
Right. When
Um,
Skynet becomes self-aware and we're fighting the apocalypse, because
do you want me to type in ChatGPT, is Skynet real? Do you want me to type that in there?
no, I don't. But there is, with AI, that is not completely beyond the pale, and regulations about it as it advances. There are questions about it that it can become out of control, and so
Steve Hawking
that is
said it's going
something
to kill
beyond
us.
its immediate use.
Steve Hawking said it's going to kill us.
Mm.
And that's a valid regulation concern that we should not be the sci-fi movie that doesn't listen to that crazy guy who thinks the pyramids were alien landing platforms.
Yes, or what did the guy say? If we're truly the only people existing in billions and billions and billions of miles of space, that it's scary, and if we are not, that's also scary. Like each one of them are scary. So, good show today. We're not doing our usual long-winded show. Good long-winded, but that was our conversation on social media today. We're going to start bringing you guys a little more concise. Please, I lost my train of thought. Please keep sending in questions via email. Someone said I wanted to ask a question, but I feel it's stupid. There's no such thing as a stupid question, only stupid people. So go ahead and ask your question anyway, and we'll get out of here. Everyone's question
As value.
is valid and worth asking, especially if it's a legitimate question. Of course, I don't answer the troll questions. I will bring them on here sometimes just to have fun. And those of you who keep yelling at us through TikTok, and I've invited you on the show, take the challenge. Come on the show. If you're ready to have a debate with Harold and Dave, they'll welcome you to come on here and have a debate with them. I'm just saying, make sure you know what you're talking about.
Gotta have your receipts now. Gotta have your receipts.
Make sure you have your receipts with these two, because if you don't, it's not going to go the way you think. Thank you all.
We're making this a celebrity death match. When did this become Thunderdome?
Yes.
Wait, I didn't say they were coming on here to debate and yell at you. I said they have some people have some points that they want to bring up, but sometimes, people do the generic answers. For instance, one of the comments to immigration, when you guys were talking about asylum seekers and people coming over, and Harold talked about corporations benefiting, someone said they want them here. They literally get money, a phone, and a map. I'm like, well, who gets money, a phone, and a map? Can you tell me who's exactly getting the phones, the maps, and the money? Harold's in Miami. It used to be said, when Cuban refugees got here, they were immediately given a social security card, an ID, and a house. And I'm like, huh? What are you talking about?
Well, not in that extent, but I would tell them to go back and read I think it's 1963 or 1964 Cuba Adjustment Act. Mm-hmm. And then they can find out what benefits those individuals might be eligible for entering our country.
Yeah.
And I guess my thing is that you're right. There's no stupid question, because when you ask a question, there's a certain presumption of genuineness to the question and a willingness to get information. And then there's the saying, you can't argue with stupid. And, when people are committed saying, hey, they're getting money, a map, and a phone, it's like, well, you're not asking a question. You're asserting a fact that is fantastical. And now we're having to argue with you about it. That's not very productive.
Yeah, and I don't argue. I discuss. But all I will say is QAnon is not an acceptable reference or source. That's all I'll say.
Dave.
Oh, my bad. Did I say something wrong?
Dave.
No, that's
okay.
I get all my information from proudboys.net.